They thought the Mafia boss had no heart until he saw her broken under the rain. "Who did this to you?" he whispered, and hell itself answered. By morning, every man who touched her was gone. Click subscribe, because this is what happens when monsters fall in love. I've been invisible for 6 months. That's what happens when you sing in a club owned by Donald Escobar. You learn to move through the room like music itself, present but intangible, heard but never truly seen. My voice fills the space between crystal glasses and hushed conversations. I perform songs about love and loss for men who deal in neither, and I collect my pay in cash from a manager who never quite meets my eyes. The Glass Rose sits in the heart of the East Coast's underworld. All velvet booths and Art Deco chandeliers, and a stage barely large enough for a woman and a piano. The clientele wears expensive suits that hide expensive weapons, and they speak in code I've learned not to decipher. Donald Escobar himself is a presence I've trained myself to ignore. I sense him before I see him, the way the room shifts when he enters. Conversations dropping to murmurs, men straightening in their seats, dark hair swept back, tailored suits that move like liquid shadow, and eyes cold enough to freeze blood. Those eyes have never landed on me, not once in 6 months. He conducts business in the private booths while I sing. I've learned the pattern of his meetings, the men who arrive through the back entrance, the drinks served in crystal tumblers, the envelopes exchanged under tables. I sing louder on those nights, my voice a curtain between their world and the rest of the room. I don't ask questions. That's not why I'm here. My only anchor in this carefully controlled chaos is routine. Monday through Thursday, I arrive at 9, rehearse for 30 minutes with Marco, the pianist who smells like cologne and cigarettes. Perform from 10 until 2 in the morning. Then I collect my tips, stuff them in my purse, and take the subway back to my studio apartment in Queens. 40 minutes on the L train, headphones in, eyes down. The rent is $1,400 a month, which leaves me exactly $200 after utilities for everything else. Food, coffee, the winter coat I've been meaning to replace for 2 years. I sing because I have to, because $89,000 in student loans doesn't vanish on its own. Because I spent 4 years training to save lives as a paramedic, worked another 3 in the field, and walked away from it all after one call went wrong, after I couldn't save the one person who mattered. My partner, my friend, the woman who taught me how to tie a tourniquet and how to survive in a profession that devours its own. She bled out in my arms while I did everything right, and it still wasn't enough. The lawsuit came 6 months later. Negligence, they called it. The settlement emptied my savings and filled my nights with a debt I'll be paying into my 40s. So I traded trauma for tips, scrubs for sequins, emergency rooms for empty stages in clubs where no one asks about your past. Thursday night, the clock above the bar reads 1:47 a.m. as I finish the last set. My throat aches from pushing through 3 hours of smoky air, and my feet protest against the heels I've worn too many nights in a row. November in New York means the cold seeps in early, and through the club's narrow windows, I watch rain begin to sheet against the glass. "You heading out?" Marco asks, packing up his sheet music. He smells like the same cologne he's worn since I started something woody that makes me think of funerals. Yeah, long night. I slip my coat on, feeling the weight of folded bills in my purse. $340, enough to cover groceries, and maybe, finally, that winter coat. He studies me with concern that feels practiced. "Careful out there. Streets are getting nasty." I'm always careful. Outside, the rain has gone from drizzle to deluge. I stand under the club's flickering neon sign, a rose rendered in pink and red light, and consider calling a car I can't afford. 4 blocks. That's all it is. 4 blocks from the Glass Rose to the subway station on Lexington. I've walked it every Thursday for 6 months, always alone, always after 2 a.m. The neighborhood is supposed to be safe. This is Escobar territory, after all. I've heard the whispers from the other girls who work the clubs on this strict protection. Order. Consequences for anyone who breaks the rules. Tonight, I don't have change for a cab. Tonight, The subway is my only option. I pull my coat tighter, tuck my purse under my arm, and step into the rain. The streets are slick and empty. Streetlights reflect off puddles like oil paintings, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wails. My heels click against wet pavement, echoing in the silence. 1 block down, 3 to go. That's when I hear the footsteps behind me. The footsteps multiplied. 3 sets, maybe 4. I didn't turn around, didn't run. Running made you pray. But my hand slipped into my purse, fingers closing around my keys, the only weapon I had. Emma Stone. The voice came from behind, rough as gravel. You're coming with us. I spun, keys jutting between my knuckles. I don't know you, but we know you. The man stepped into the streetlight. Ski mask, black jacket. Behind him, 3 more shadows materialized from the rain. Know who you work for. Know who you are to him. I don't know what. The first punch came before I finished the sentence. Knuckles connected with my cheekbone, and the world tilted sideways. I hit the pavement, palms scraping against wet concrete. Copper flooded my mouth. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard laughter. Tell Escobar the streets don't fear him anymore. Then the boot started. Ribs, stomach, spine. Each impact drove the air from my lungs until breathing became a luxury I couldn't afford. I curled into myself, arms over my head, as the rain mixed with something warmer running down my face. Blood, I realized distantly. Mine, the clinical part of my brain, the part trained to assess trauma, cataloged the damage. Fractured ribs, probable. Concussion, likely. Internal bleeding, possible. But that voice grew fainter with each kick until there was only darkness and rain and the taste of my own blood. Somewhere far away, tires squealed. Shouts, gunfire that cracked through the night like thunder. Then silence. Emma. The voice cut through the fog, sharp and commanding. Hands careful, impossibly gentle, cupped my face. Emma. Look at me. I forced my swollen eye open. Through the blur of rain and blood, I saw him. Donald Escobar. Not the shadow I'd avoided for 6 months, but the man himself, kneeling in the street beside me. His expensive suit was already ruined by rain and gutter water, but he didn't seem to notice. His hands trembled against my face. Who did this to you? His voice was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that preceded violence. I tried to speak, but only managed a wet cough that sprayed crimson across his white shirt. His jaw clenched, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. Get a car. Now. He barked the order over his shoulder, then looked back at me. Something in his eyes, something almost human, flickered. Stay with me, Emma. Stay awake. You shouldn't see me like this. The words came out slurred, broken. Shame burned hotter than pain. I'd spent 6 months being invisible, and now I was laid bare, broken and bleeding in his arms. Shut up. But his thumb brushed my cheekbone with devastating tenderness. Just breathe. The mansion materialized through my fractured consciousness like a fever dream. I registered marble floors streaked with my blood, chandeliers that swam in my vision, and Donald's voice, a constant, furious presence, issuing orders I couldn't quite parse. Call Marcus. I want every street camera from Lexington to 5th pulled within the hour. His footsteps echoed as he carried me upstairs. I couldn't count. Lock down the ports. No one leaves the city. No one. Boss. The shipment. Do I look like I care about the fucking shipment? The roar shook something loose in my chest, and I coughed again. Blood flecked his collar. He looked down at me, and his expression shifted, softened. Almost there. Hold on. He kicked open a door, and suddenly I was being laid on something impossibly soft. Silk sheets. A bed the size of my entire studio apartment. I tried to focus, but the room kept tilting. Get Dr. Reyes. I don't care if you have to drag him out of surgery. Tell him if he's not here in 20 minutes, I'll make sure he never works again. Donald's hands moved over me with surprising competence, checking my pulse, lifting my eyelids, pressing gently against my ribs. Each touch clinical, controlled. Then his fingers stilled on my wrist. I followed his gaze. A scar. Thin. White. barely visible above my pulse point. I'd gotten it years ago, catching a scalpel while working an emergency. But he was staring at it like he'd seen a ghost. You remember? My voice was barely a whisper. His eyes snapped to mine. What? The scar. You're remembering. 3 years ago. Different rain. Different blood. She found him in an alley off Amsterdam Avenue, slumped against a dumpster with his hand pressed to his side. Blood seeped between his fingers, too much blood. Arterial. Hey, stay with me. She dropped to her knees. EMS bag, already open. No partner that night. Solo shift. Just her, and the dying man with the expensive watch. Leave me. His voice rattled. Not happening. She cut away his shirt, Armani, she noted distantly, and found the gunshot wound. Through and through. Lucky. She packed it with gauze, applied pressure. What's your name? Does it matter? It does, if you want to live. Her hands worked on autopilot, checking vitals, starting an IV line with supplies she shouldn't have been carrying off duty. Stay awake. Talk to me. He watched her with eyes that held too much darkness for someone so young. Why are you helping? It's what I do. She secured the pressure dressing, then called for an ambulance. You're going to make it, but you need to tell the ER staff what happened. I won't. He gripped her wrist with surprising strength. His blood smeared across her skin. Forget you saw me. I'm a paramedic. I'm legally required. Forget. Please. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something that made her pause. Not just danger, but resignation. A man who expected to die in alleys and considered rescue a complication. She pulled out a business card with her personal number. If you survive this, call me. Let me know you're okay. He took the card, and she never saw him again. Until 6 months ago, when she walked into the Glass Rose and recognized the man in the private booth. You never called. My words dragged him back to the present. Donald's face was unreadable. You told me to forget. You're Donald Escobar. You don't follow orders. I followed yours. His hand still rested on my wrist, thumb over the scar. I looked for you after. Spent weeks, but you disappeared. Changed numbers. Moved apartments. I thought you were smart. Thought you'd realized who I was and ran. I did realize. 6 months ago. And you stayed. He said it like an accusation. Like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. I needed the job. You needed... He stopped, jaw working. When he spoke again, his voice was raw. I've had men watching you since the first night you walked onto that stage. Every shift. Every walk home. How did they miss this? They can't be everywhere. They should have been. He stood abruptly, pulling out his phone. When he spoke, the tenderness was gone, replaced by something cold and lethal. By dawn, I want names. Every man who touched her. Every man who knew and said nothing. Every man who breathes her name dies. Am I clear? The response on the other end must have been affirmative because he hung up without waiting for confirmation. I tried to sit up, and my vision grayed. Donald, don't. He was beside me again, hands on my shoulders, easing me back down. Don't move. Don't speak. Just rest. You can't kill people because of me. His laugh was bitter. I can't? He leaned close. And I saw it then, the fracture in his armor. The first real crack in the man who ruled through fear and control. His eyes were red-rimmed. His hands still trembled. Emma, I've wanted to burn this city down for less. For you, there's nothing I won't do. This isn't protection. My words slurred, consciousness slipping. It's possession. Call it whatever you want. He brushed wet hair from my forehead. But by dawn, everyone will know. You're mine. And anyone who touches you answers to me. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was his face, beautiful and terrible, and absolutely certain. For the first time in 6 months, I wasn't invisible anymore. I was wanted. And that terrified me more than any beating ever could. I woke to screaming. Not mine. Someone else's. Male. Coming from somewhere below. Muffled by floors and walls, but unmistakable in its agony. The sound rose and fell like a siren, then cut off abruptly. Silence pressed in, broken only by my own ragged breathing. I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain exploded across my ribs, sharp, specific, the kind that meant cracked bone pressing against tissue. My face felt swollen, foreign. When I lifted my hand to touch it, I found bandages wrapped around my forehead and left eye. The room came into focus slowly. Cream-colored walls, crown molding, a chandelier that probably cost more than I'd make in a year. The bed I was lying in could sleep 4 people comfortably. Silk sheets clung to my skin, and I realized someone had changed me out of my ruined clothes into an oversized button-down shirt that smelled like expensive cologne. Donald's shirt. "You're awake," the voice came from the doorway. A woman, maybe 50, with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun, and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen too much to be shocked by anything. "I'm Dr. Reyes. Try not to move too quickly." Where? My throat felt like I'd swallowed glass. "Mr. Escobar's private residence." She moved to the bedside, pulling out a penlight to check my pupils. "You have 3 cracked ribs, a concussion, significant bruising, and facial lacerations that required stitches. You're lucky. It could have been much worse." Lucky. The word tasted bitter. "How long have I been here?" 8 hours. She made notes on a tablet. "I've given you painkillers, but you'll need to take it easy for at least 2 weeks. No strenuous activity, plenty of rest." Another scream echoed from below, closer this time. Dr. Reyes didn't flinch. "What is that?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. Her expression remained neutral. "I suggest you don't ask questions you don't want answered." She capped a prescription bottle and set it on the nightstand. "Take these every 6 hours for pain. I'll be back tomorrow to check on you." She left before I could respond, closing the door with a soft click that sounded too much like a lock engaging. I waited 20 minutes before attempting to stand. The room tilted when I pushed myself up, and I had to grip the bedpost until my vision cleared. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, but I forced them to hold my weight. The house was quiet now, too quiet. I moved toward the door, half expecting it to be locked, but the handle turned easily. The hallway beyond stretched in both directions, all polished hardwood and expensive art. I chose left, following the faint sound of voices. The stairs were a challenge. Each step sent fire through my ribs, and I had to pause on the landing to catch my breath. That's when I heard it, not screaming this time, but talking. Donald's voice, low and controlled. Someone else responded, words too muffled to make out. I followed the sound to a half-open door at the end of the hall. Warm light spilled out, and with it, the unmistakable copper scent of blood. "I'll ask one more time," Donald's voice carried the same terrible calm from the night before. "Who gave the order?" "I don't, please. I'm just a contractor. I don't know names." The sound of impact, flesh on flesh, a wet gasp. Wrong answer. I should have walked away. Should have gone back to the bedroom and pretended I'd heard nothing. But my feet carried me forward until I could see through the crack in the door. The room was a study. Oak desk, leather chairs, bookshelves lined with volumes that had probably never been read. And in the center, tied to a chair, was a man I recognized from the attack. Ski mask gone, face swollen, blood streaming from his nose and mouth. Donald stood in front of him, perfectly composed despite the blood splattered across his rolled-up shirt sleeves. 2 other men flanked the door enforcers, I assumed, watching with the bored expressions of people who'd witnessed this 100 times before. "You put your hands on her." Donald's voice dropped to a whisper. "You kicked her while she was down. You enjoyed it." "I was just following orders." "Whose orders?" "Serrano! Victor Serrano!" The name burst out of him like a confession. "He paid us. Said it was a message. Said you needed to know the streets don't belong to you anymore." Donald's posture didn't change, but something in the air shifted, grew colder. "And the woman?" "She was. He said she was your soft spot. Said you've been protecting her, watching her. He wanted to prove you're weak." Soft spot. The words hit me harder than any fist had. This wasn't random, wasn't bad luck, or wrong place, wrong time. I'd been targeted, used as ammunition in a war I didn't know was being fought. Soft spot. Donald repeated slowly. He pulled something from his pocket, a gun, sleek and black. Did Serrano tell you what happens to men who touch what's mine? Please, I have a family. So did the men you killed for him last year. Donald pressed the barrel against the man's forehead. You made a choice. Now live with it. Or don't. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a whimper, because Donald's head snapped toward the door. Our eyes met through the crack. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he lowered the gun. Get him out of here. He handed the weapon to one of his enforcers. Take him to the docks. Make it clean. The men dragged the sobbing contractor out through a side door. Donald stood alone in the study, staring at the empty chair, at the blood pooling on the hardwood floor. Then he turned toward me. I stepped back, but he was already moving, closing the distance between us in 3 strides. Up close, I could see the exhaustion carved into his face, the dark circles under his eyes. He'd been awake all night, hunting. You should be resting. His hand lifted, hovering near my bandaged face but not quite touching. I heard screaming. I know. No apology, no explanation, just acknowledgement. He said I was your soft spot. My voice cracked. Is that true? Donald's jaw clenched. It's what Serrano believes. And what do you believe? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of something he'd never admit out loud. I believe Victor Serrano made a mistake. He wanted to test me, to see if I'd bleed for you. And will you? His hand finally settled on my cheek, thumb brushing the edge of the bandage. I already am. Behind him, in the study, I could see his reflection in the mirror hanging above the fireplace. Blood smeared across the glass. His face, distorted by the stain, features sharp and dangerous. He followed my gaze, saw what I was seeing, and his expression hardened into something inhuman. Soft spot? He said it to our reflections. To the empty room. To the city beyond these walls. They just signed their own death warrants. He turned back to me, and for a moment, I saw both men at once, the one who'd held me gently in the rain, and the one who'd tortured a man in his study without flinching. They weren't separate. They never had been. Every man who touched you is dead or dying. He said it like a promise, like a confession. And by tomorrow night, Victor Serrano will know what happens when someone tries to use you against me. This isn't protection, Donald. No. His hand fell away from my face. It's war, and you're the reason I'm going to win. He walked past me, back toward the stairs, leaving me alone with the blood and the silence and the terrible certainty that I'd become the catalyst for something I couldn't stop. The city was about to burn, and it would burn for me. 3 days passed in a blur of pain medication and forced rest. Dr. Reyes came and went with the regularity of a prison guard, checking vitals, changing bandages, reminding me not to move too quickly. The bruises on my face shifted from purple to green to yellow. The swelling around my eye receded enough that I could see clearly again. My ribs still screamed with every breath, but I learned to breathe shallower, to take up less space. Donald kept his distance. I'd see him sometimes. Through the bedroom door he insisted on leaving open, pacing the hallway at odd hours, taking calls in terse, clipped sentences. Once, at 3 in the morning, I woke to find him sitting in the chair by the window, watching me sleep. When our eyes met, he stood without a word and left. He was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost haunting his own house. On the 4th day, I forced myself out of bed properly. Dr. Reyes had cleared me for limited movement, which I interpreted as permission to reclaim some autonomy. I showered for the first time since the attack, watching pink-tinged water circle the drain. The mirror was less forgiving than I'd hoped. My left eye was still ringed with fading bruises. The stitches along my cheekbone would leave a scar. I dressed in clothes someone had left folded, on the dresser soft leggings, an oversized sweater that definitely wasn't mine. When I emerged from the bedroom, the house felt different in daylight, less like a prison, more like a museum. Every surface gleamed. Every piece of art looked expensive enough to fund a year of my student loans. I found Donald in the study where he'd interrogated the contractor. The bloodstain was gone, floor polished to a mirror shine. He stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, watching the city sprawl below. I don't care what it costs. I want every property Serrano owns audited by Friday. He paused. No, Marco. I want them buried in legal fees until they can't afford to breathe. Another pause. Good. Call me when it's done. He hung up and turned, stopping short when he saw me in the doorway. You shouldn't be out of bed. But there was no real reprimand in his voice. Just observation. I've been in bed for 4 days. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're healing. There's a difference. I stepped into the study, each movement deliberate despite the ache in my ribs. How many? How many? What? How many men have you killed because of me? His expression didn't change. Does it matter? Yes. He considered this, head tilting slightly. 4 directly, another 6 by proxy. 3 more will be dead by tonight. He said it the way someone might list grocery items. Detached. Clinical. Does that number make you feel better or worse? Neither. Both. I sank into the leather chair across from his desk, suddenly exhausted. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. You're supposed to feel safe. He moved closer, but kept the desk between us. A barrier. That's why I'm doing this. No. The word came out sharper than intended. You're doing this because you can't stand the idea that someone touched something you consider yours. His hands flattened on the desk. Is that what you think? Isn't it? I met his gaze. You said it yourself. You're mine. Not, you're safe. Not, you're protected. Mine. Emma. You've been watching me. The accusation hung between us. For how long? Since that night? His silence was answer enough. 3 years, I continued, voice rising. 3 years you've had people following me, watching where I go, who I talk to, and you never thought to tell me? Would you have believed me if I did? He straightened, jaw tight. Would you have trusted me? Trust? A bitter laugh escaped me. You don't get trust through surveillance, Donald. You get it by being honest. I was protecting you. From what? I stood, ignoring the protest from my ribs. From living my life? From making my own choices? Or from realizing that the man I saved wasn't worth saving? That landed. I saw it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his eyes went dark. You think I don't know what I am? His voice dropped dangerously low. You think I don't see the monster when I look in the mirror? Then why save me? Why keep watching? The questions I'd been holding back for days burst out. If you know what you are, why drag me into it? Because 3 years ago, you looked at me like I was worth saving. The words came out raw, unguarded. You didn't know who I was, didn't know what I'd done. You just saw someone bleeding and decided they deserved to live. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How? He stopped, running a hand through his hair. You were the first person in a decade to touch me without wanting something in return. The admission hung in the air between us. I thought back to that night, the alley, the blood, the man with eyes too old for his face. I'd treated hundreds of patients, saved dozens of lives, but I remembered him. Remembered the way he'd looked at me like he couldn't quite believe I was real. So you what? Decided to keep me? I shook my head. That's not gratitude, Donald. That's obsession. Maybe. He moved around the desk, closing the distance between us. Maybe it started as gratitude, evolved into something else. Protection, possession. He stopped inches away. But it's kept you alive. Those men who attacked you, they'd been planning it for weeks. Would have succeeded if I hadn't had someone watching your route home. The implications settled over me like ice water. You knew they were coming. I knew someone was watching you. I didn't know when they'd move. His hand lifted, hovering near my face. If I had, I would have stopped them before they touched you. But you didn't. My voice cracked. You let me walk into it. Let me get hurt. My man was 3 minutes behind. He called me the second they grabbed you. I was in my car before you hit the ground. His hand finally made contact, fingers gentle against the fading bruise on my cheek. 3 minutes, Emma. 3 minutes where I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, where all I saw was you dying in some gutter like I almost did. I should have stepped back, should have pushed his hand away, but my body betrayed me, leaning into the touch despite everything. You had no right. I know. You don't get to make decisions for me. I know. I'm not some project you get to fix. Some debt you need to repay. I know. His thumb brushed across my lips. But that doesn't change anything. You're still mine. And I'm still going to burn this city down for you. That's not love. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. Wasn't sure what love looked like when it came from a man built of violence and control. That's not. He kissed me. Not gently. Not like the tentative brush of new affection, but like a man drowning, desperate, claiming. His hand slid to the back of my neck, holding me in place as his mouth moved against mine with bruising intensity. I tasted desperation and possession and something darker I didn't want to name. For a heartbeat, I kissed him back, let myself fall into the heat of it, the terrible rightness of being wanted this fiercely. Then, reality crashed back. I shoved him away, or tried to. He released me immediately, but the damage was done. My hand cracked across his face before I could think, the slap echoing through the study. His head snapped to the side, a red mark already blooming on his cheek. We stood there, both breathing hard, both trembling, for different reasons. You don't get to decide what I survive. My voice shook but held firm. You don't get to kill for me. Watch me. Kiss me. Not without asking. Not without giving me a choice. Donald's hand pressed against his cheek, but his eyes never left mine. And if I asked? If I gave you the choice right now to walk away, to disappear, to go back to your life, would you take it? The question hung between us like a blade. Would I? I thought of my studio apartment, my student loans, my nights singing for criminals who never looked at me twice, the life I'd built from the ruins of my career. Safe, invisible, mine. Then I thought of the past 4 days, the blood, the violence, the way Donald looked at me like I was something sacred in a world of profane. I don't know, I whispered. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's what I thought. The war began in earnest on the 5th day. I woke to the sound of tires screeching in the driveway, men shouting orders, car doors slamming. Through the bedroom window, I watched 3 black SUVs pull up to the mansion. Donald's enforcers emerged carrying a 4th man between them, unconscious, bleeding from a wound in his shoulder. I was downstairs before I could think better of it. Kitchen! Now! Donald's voice cut through the chaos as they hauled the injured man through the service entrance. He saw me on the stairs, and his expression hardened. Emma, go back upstairs. He's losing blood. I was already moving toward them, my paramedic instincts overriding common sense. How long ago was he shot? 20 minutes, one of the enforcers answered. We stabilized him, but nothing. Get him on the table. I pushed past Donald into the kitchen. I need towels, hot water, and a first aid kit. Now. For a moment, no one moved. They all looked at Donald, waiting for permission. He stared at me, jaw clenched, then nodded once. The men scattered. I fell into the familiar rhythm, assessing the wound, checking vitals, applying pressure. The bullet had gone through cleanly, missing major arteries. Lucky. My hands moved with muscle memory I'd tried to forget, suturing and bandaging, while the man groaned, semi-conscious on Donald's kitchen table. You're going to be fine, I told him, tying off the last stitch. But you need antibiotics and rest. No field work for at least 2 weeks. He nodded weakly. Donald's men carried him out. And suddenly, I was alone in the kitchen with blood on my hands and the ghost of my old life settling over my shoulders. Donald appeared in the doorway, watching me scrub my hands in the sink. Where did you learn to do that? I told you. I was a paramedic. The water ran pink, then clear, before I became invisible. You're not invisible anymore. He moved closer. The moment you walked downstairs, every man here saw exactly who you are. And who am I? His hand covered mine, stilling my compulsive scrubbing. Mine. And now they know it too. After that, they kept bringing them to me. 2 more that afternoon, one with a knife wound to the thigh, another with a dislocated shoulder from a fight in one of Serrano's clubs. I treated them in the kitchen that had become an impromptu field hospital, ignoring Donald's growing frustration every time another injured man appeared. "This is exactly what I didn't want," he said, after I'd sent the third man away with instructions on wound care. "You're not supposed to be part of this." "I already am part of this." I cleaned blood from under my fingernails. The moment Serrano used me as a message, I became part of this. At least now, I'm useful. "You think I need you to be useful?" His voice went dangerous. "Emma, I need you to be safe." "Well, you can't have both." I met his eyes. "Either I'm some fragile thing you hide away, or I'm a person who gets to make choices. You don't get to decide which version suits you better." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, shook his head. "You're going to drive me insane." "Good. Maybe then we'll be even." By evening, word had spread through the underworld. I heard it in the way the men spoke when they thought I wasn't listening, hushed conversations about Escobar's girl, the one who'd patched up his soldiers, the one who wasn't afraid. The whispers painted me as something I wasn't. Brave, fierce, dangerous by association. But maybe that was who I needed to become. The eighth injured man brought something other than wounds information. His name was Rico, one of Donald's lower-level enforcers who'd been working surveillance on Serrano's operations. A bullet had grazed his ribs, but he was coherent enough to talk while I cleaned the wound. "Overheard something at the docks," he muttered, wincing as I applied antiseptic. "Serrano's planning something big. Dawn tomorrow." Donald, who'd been standing guard in the doorway, straightened. "What kind of something?" "Your shipment lines. All of them. Simultaneous hits." Rico's breathing was labored. "He's got enough men to take out 3 warehouses at once. Wants to cripple your distribution before you can retaliate." The room went silent. I could feel Donald's fury radiating like heat. "Which warehouses?" His voice was deadly calm. Didn't catch all of it, but one was definitely Red Hook, the textile warehouse. Donald pulled out his phone, already dialing. "Get Marco. Tell him to move up security on all 3 distribution points. I want triple the usual patrol, and no one goes in or out without clearance." He paused. "And pull the manifests. I want to know exactly what Serrano thinks he's taking." He left the room mid-call, barking orders to someone on the other end. I finished bandaging Rico and sent him off with 2 of Donald's men. But something nagged at me. The textile warehouse in Red Hook. I'd heard Donald mention it before, usually in passing during phone calls he thought I wasn't listening to. It wasn't just distribution, it was his largest import hub. If Serrano took it out, the damage would be catastrophic. I found Donald in his study an hour later, surrounded by maps and manifests, phone constantly ringing. "I'm pulling everyone back to defensive positions," he said without looking up. "Let him come. We'll be ready." "What if he's not coming?" The question was out before I'd fully formed the thought. He glanced up. "What?" "What if the warehouse attack is a diversion?" I moved closer, studying the map spread across his desk. "Serrano knows you'll fortify your positions. What if he wants you distracted?" Donald's eyes narrowed. "Distracted from what?" "I don't know. But if I were planning a war, I wouldn't announce my real target." I traced a finger along the map. "He's already proven he's willing to use misdirection. He came after me to test you. Maybe he's doing the same thing with the warehouses." For a moment, Donald just stared at me. Then he picked up his phone. "Marco, I need you to check something." By midnight, I'd pieced together what I could from fragments of overheard conversations and the maps Donald had left scattered across the study. The textile warehouse in Red Hook was the obvious target, which meant it probably wasn't the real one. But there was another location, a smaller warehouse on the pier, barely marked on the distribution maps. Donald had mentioned it once, dismissively, as a temporary holding facility. Temporary meant unguarded, vulnerable. I found Donald's driver in the garage, dozing in one of the SUVs. He startled awake when I knocked on the window. "I need you to take me to Red Hook." I kept my voice calm, authoritative. "Donald's orders." He frowned. "Boss didn't mention." "He wouldn't. It's a surprise inspection." I opened the passenger door before he could argue. "We need to leave now." He hesitated, then shrugged and started the engine. "Your funeral." 20 minutes later, we pulled up to the pier. The smaller warehouse loomed against the night sky, dark and silent. Too silent. "Wait here," I told the driver, already climbing out. "Miss Stone, I don't think." "Just wait." I approached the warehouse entrance, every instinct screaming warning. The door was unlocked. Inside, the space was empty, no cargo, no workers, just shadows and the smell of salt water. Then I heard the click of a safety being released. "Emma Stone!" The voice came from behind me, smooth and venomous. "Donald's soft spot. We've been waiting for you." I turned slowly. 3 men emerged from the shadows, guns raised. And in the center, immaculate, in a tailored suit despite the hour, stood a man who could only be Victor Serrano. He smiled. "Did you really think we wouldn't know you were coming?" The warehouse door slammed shut behind me. Through the grimy windows, I saw the driver slumped over the steering wheel, unconscious or dead. I couldn't tell. Serrano stepped closer, gun lowered but present. "Donald's going to be devastated when he finds out. His girl, walking straight into our hands." He tilted his head. "Tell me, does he know you're here? Or did you come to play hero all on your own?" I said nothing. My mind raced through options, exits, possibilities, all dead ends. That's what I thought. Serrano's smile widened. "You know what the best part is? He's probably just now realizing you're gone. Probably tearing apart his mansion, looking for you." He pulled out his phone. "Let's let him know where you are. See how long it takes him to come running." He snapped a photo of me, bruised and trapped, surrounded by armed men. Then he sent it. The message was simple. "You can't save her twice." They bound my wrists with zip ties that bit into skin already tender from healing. One of Serrano's men shoved me into a chair metal, cold, bolted to the concrete floor. The warehouse had been converted into something else. Not storage, an execution room. Serrano dismissed his men with a wave. They disappeared into the shadows, but I could feel them watching, waiting. "You know what I find fascinating about you, Emma?" He pulled up a chair, sitting close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive that didn't mask the underlying scent of violence. "You're nobody, a failed paramedic singing in dive bars. And yet Donald Escobar, the man who built an empire on corpses, looks at you like you're something precious." I kept my expression blank, remembering my training. In emergencies, stay calm. Don't show fear. It only makes predators hungrier. "Not going to talk?" He smiled. "That's fine. I'll talk enough for both of us." He leaned back, studying me like a specimen. "Did you know I've been watching you almost as long as Donald has? When I found out he had a weakness, I had to see for myself. What made you so special?" "I'm not special. I'm just someone who was in the wrong place at the wrong time." "Twice," he corrected. "First in that alley 3 years ago, then outside his club last week. Bad luck or destiny?" He pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "I did my research on you after the first attack. Emma Stone, former paramedic, East Coast General Hospital. Exemplary record until a malpractice suit forced you out. Student loans you'll be paying until you're 40. No family except—" He paused, eyes glinting. "Well, except the family you don't know about." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "Your father, Robert Stone." He showed me his phone, a photo of a man I barely remembered. Dark hair, kind eyes, the same eyes I saw in the mirror. Worked as an accountant for various businesses in the city. Legitimate, as far as you knew. But Robert Stone had a side job. He cooked books for some very dangerous people, one of whom was my predecessor, Antonio Vega. The name meant nothing to me, but Serrano's expression said it should. Vega ran this territory before Donald. Had a good thing going, protection rackets, import-export, the usual. Until 15 years ago, when a young, ambitious enforcer decided he wanted more. Serrano's smile turned cruel. That enforcer was Donald Escobar. And when he made his move, he didn't just kill Vega. He killed everyone connected to him. Associates, accountants, lawyers, anyone who knew where the bodies were buried. My mouth went dry. "You're lying." "Am I?" He scrolled to another photo. A crime scene. Bodies covered with sheets, blood pooling on concrete. Your father was collateral damage. Wrong place, wrong time. Just like you keep saying you are. He put the phone away. Donald probably doesn't even remember him. Just another name on a list of people who had to die so he could rise. I couldn't breathe. The zip ties cut deeper into my wrists. Or maybe that was just my pulse hammering against them. He would have told me. Would he? Or would he have kept it buried? Hoping you'd never find out that your father's death is on his hands? Serrano leaned closer. That's the thing about men like Donald. They protect what they love by hiding what they've done. And you poor, naive Emma, you saved the life of the man who destroyed yours. The study was empty. Donald stood in the doorway. Phone pressed so hard against his ear it should have cracked. What do you mean she's gone? She left an hour ago, Marco said, voice tight with fear, a reasonable response given what was about to happen to him. Told the driver it was your orders. Inspection at Red Hook. I gave no such orders. Donald's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. Find her, now. He hung up and hurled the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, and the sound of it breaking did nothing to calm the storm building in his chest. Emma was gone, unprotected, in the middle of a war he'd started for her. His phone, the burner he kept for emergencies, buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number, he answered, without speaking. Donald Escobar. Serrano's voice came through smooth as silk. We need to talk about your missing girl. Every muscle in Donald's body went rigid. Where is she? Safe. For now. But you know how these things go. Accidents happen. Especially to people who wander into places they don't belong. If you touch her, you'll what? Kill me? You're already trying. A pause. Check your messages. I sent you something. The call ended. Donald switched to his message app, and his blood turned to ice. The photo loaded slowly, pixelating from top to bottom. Emma, bound to a chair. A fresh cut above her eyebrow, bleeding down her face. Her expression was defiant, but he could see the fear underneath, and the caption beneath, You can't save her twice. His hands shook. Not from fear he'd forgotten how to feel that years ago, but from rage, so pure, so absolute, it threatened to consume him from the inside out. He made 3 calls. The first to his enforcers. Mobilize everyone. I want every property Serrano owns surrounded in the next 30 minutes. The second to his weapons supplier. I need enough firepower to level a city block. I don't care what it costs. The third to his most trusted man. The one who'd been with him since the beginning. Rico. Remember that favor you owe me? I'm calling it in. Find Emma, and I'll give you anything you want. Then he walked to his safe, pulled out his personal arsenal, and began loading magazines with the methodical precision of a man preparing for war. He's not coming for you. Serrano stood, pacing the perimeter of my prison. Or if he does, it'll be too late. That's the beauty of this plan. Either way, I win. You don't know him. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He'll come. Oh, I'm counting on it. He gestured to one of his men, who brought over a small table. On it, a knife, pliers, a gun, tools of persuasion. But before he arrives, you and I are going to have a conversation about loyalty, about what you mean to him, and about whether you're willing to die for a man who killed your father. I stared at the tools, then at Serrano. I'm not telling you anything. You will. He picked up the knife, testing its edge against his thumb. Everyone talks eventually. It's just a matter of how much pain they can endure first. He moved toward me, blade catching the dim light. My heart hammered. This was it. The moment where I found out what I was really made of. Then the warehouse exploded. Not figuratively. The entire north wall erupted in flame and debris, the blast throwing Serrano backward. I hit the floor, still tied to the chair, ears ringing, choking on smoke and concrete dust. Through the chaos, a figure emerged from the flames. Tall, dark, moving with lethal purpose. Donald. He fired twice. 2 of Serrano's men dropped. Then he was next to me, cutting through the zip ties with a knife that appeared from nowhere. Can you walk? His voice was rough, urgent. I nodded, though my legs felt like water. Good. Stay behind me. He pulled me up, and I saw his face properly. Blood splattered across his cheek, eyes burning with something beyond rage. This ends tonight. More gunfire erupted. Donald shoved me behind a concrete pillar and returned fire with practiced ease. Each shot found its target. 3 men down. 4. 5. Then Serrano's voice cut through the chaos. You came alone? For her? He laughed, backing toward a side exit. You really are weak. Donald advanced, gun raised. Says the man running. I'm not running. I'm adapting. Serrano smiled. You won, Escobar. You got your girl back, but she knows now. About her father, about what you did. His eyes found mine. Ask him, Emma. Ask him if it's true. Donald's gun didn't waver, but something in his expression fractured. Don't, I whispered. But Serrano was already gone, disappearing into the smoke. Donald lowered his weapon and turned to me. In the firelight, covered in blood and ash, he looked like something pulled from hell itself. Is it true? The question burned my throat. My father, did you kill him? His silence was answer enough. Donald's silence lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds where the truth hung between us like smoke, choking and undeniable. Then his expression shuttered completely. We're leaving. He gripped my arm, pulling me toward the exit. Don't. I wrenched free, stumbling back. Don't you dare touch me right now. Emma, you killed my father. The words tasted like ash. All this time, you've been protecting me from a debt you created. Sirens wailed in the distance. The warehouse fire cast dancing shadows across his face, and for the first time, I saw him clearly. Not the man who'd held me in the rain, not the boss who'd burned the city for me, but the killer who'd taken everything before I even knew what I'd lost. I didn't know, he said quietly. Not until 6 months ago, when I ran your background, when I realized. He stopped, jaw clenched. If I could take it back. You can't, my voice cracked. You can't undo 15 years of lies. Another explosion rocked the building. Flames licked up the walls, spreading faster than seemed natural. Donald's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket, but he ignored it. Then hate me later. He moved toward me again, and this time I didn't pull away. Right now, we survive. We emerged from the burning warehouse into chaos. Donald's men had Serrano's compound surrounded 3 blocks of converted warehouses along the pier, all lit up like a war zone. Gunfire cracked through the night air. Men shouted orders in the dark, and somewhere in the distance, more sirens converged. Boss! Rico appeared from the smoke, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. Serrano's holed up in the main building, 3rd floor. He's got maybe 8 men left. 8, Donald repeated, loading a fresh magazine into his gun. And how many do we have? 20, give or take the wounded. Donald's smile was cold. More than enough. He turned to me, and I saw the shift happen in real time. The man I'd argued with in the warehouse disappeared, replaced by something darker, more dangerous. Stay with Rico. He'll get you to the cars. No. The word surprised us both. Emma. This isn't. I said no. I picked up a piece of rebar from the rubble, testing its weight. You don't get to protect me from this. Not anymore. Not after everything. For a moment, I thought he'd argue. Force me into the car. Lock me away somewhere safe while he painted the city red. But he just stared at me. Something like respect flickering in his eyes. Stay behind me, he said finally. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? I nodded, though we both knew it was a lie. The main building's entrance was already breached, door hanging off its hinges. Inside, the scene was biblical. Bodies littered the floor, Serrano's men, mostly, but a few of Donald's too. The air smelled like cordite and copper. Blood pooled in the grooves between floorboards. Donald moved through it like a predator, each step calculated. His men fanned out behind him, checking corners, clearing rooms. I followed, gripping the rebar so hard my knuckles went white. The first attack came from the stairwell. 2 of Serrano's men opened fire from above, bullets chewing through drywall and concrete. Donald shoved me behind a support beam, returning fire with precision that spoke of years of practice. Both men dropped. "Second floor clear," one of Donald's enforcers called out. We climbed the stairs. The second floor was worse evidence of an earlier battle. Shell casings everywhere, bullet holes in the walls. A man slumped in the corner, still breathing but not for much longer. "Third floor," Donald murmured, eyes scanning the ceiling. "That's where he'll make his stand." The door at the top of the stairs was reinforced steel. Donald's men placed charges while the rest of us took cover. The explosion was deafening, even through my hands pressed over my ears. Then we poured through. Serrano's remaining men were waiting. The gunfight that followed was brutal, close-quarters combat where every bullet counted. I pressed myself against the wall, watching Donald move with lethal grace, shooting, reloading, advancing. 2 men fell. 3, 4. Then I saw him. One of Serrano's guards had circled behind us, gun raised toward Donald's back. There was no time to shout, no time to think. I swung the rebar with everything I had. It connected with his skull with a sickening crack. He dropped, gun clattering across the floor. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at what I'd done. Then Donald was beside me, pulling me close. "You saved my life." He said it, like he couldn't quite believe it. Again, the moment shattered when Serrano's voice echoed through the space. "Touching, really. But this ends now, Escobar." He emerged from the shadows of what must have been his office, flanked by his last 2 men. His suit was ruined, face bloodied, but he still moved with that same dangerous confidence. "You've destroyed everything," Serrano continued, gesturing at the carnage around us. "My operations, my men, my reputation. For what? For her?" He laughed. The sound edged with hysteria. "She's already destroyed. You saw to that 15 years ago when you put a bullet in her father's head." Donald's gun raised. "Final words? Just one question." Serrano's smile turned vicious. "Did you ever tell her the whole truth? That you didn't just kill Robert Stone. You made him beg first. Made him watch while you executed every man in that room. Made him die knowing his family would suffer." I felt the words like physical blows. Donald's hand trembled, barely visible, but I saw it. "That's what I thought." Serrano pulled his own gun. "Some truths are too heavy, even for men like us." The gunfight lasted seconds. Donald's men took down Serrano's guards, while Donald advanced on Serrano himself. But Serrano was fast, desperate. His shot caught Donald in the shoulder, spinning him around. I screamed. Donald kept moving. Blood spread across his shirt, but his aim never wavered. He closed the distance, batting Serrano's gun away, and pulled a knife from somewhere inside his jacket. What followed wasn't clean, wasn't quick. Donald drove the blade into Serrano's stomach, then his chest, then his throat. By the time he stopped, they were both on the ground, Donald kneeling over Serrano's dying body. "You're protecting her from me," Serrano whispered, blood bubbling on his lips. "But who protects her from you?" The words hung in the air as Serrano's eyes went empty. Donald stayed there, frozen, knife still in his hand. Around us, the warehouse fell silent, except for the crackling of distant flames and the ragged breathing of survivors. I moved toward him slowly. He looked up, and the expression on his face, the absolute devastation, nearly broke me. "Emma," he whispered, "I'm so sorry." But sorry couldn't bring my father back, couldn't undo the violence, couldn't erase the blood on his hands or the truth between us. I knelt beside him in the ruins of Serrano's empire, surrounded by death, and realized that some damage goes too deep to heal. Even love couldn't save us now. The city didn't burn. That was the strange part. After everything, the blood, the bodies, the war that had consumed 3 days, and too many lives to count, New York simply woke up and continued. Subways ran on schedule. Coffee shops opened. People complained about traffic, as if the world hadn't tilted on its axis. I watched it all from Donald's bedroom window, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like him, expensive cologne and gunpowder, the contradiction of the man himself. Dr. Reyes had come and gone twice in the past 12 hours. Donald's shoulder wound was clean, she'd assured him. The bullet had passed through muscle, missing bone, and major vessels. Lucky, she'd called it. He'd barely flinched during the stitching. I'd flinched enough for both of us. Now he stood across the room, showered, changed into fresh clothes that hid the bandage beneath. His hair was still damp, pushed back from his face. Without the blood and smoke, he looked almost human. Almost. You should eat something. His voice was carefully neutral. We'd barely spoken since leaving the warehouse, since Serrano's body had been dragged away, since the truth had settled between us like a third presence. I'm not hungry. Emma, don't. I turned from the window to face him. Don't pretend this is normal. Don't pretend we're normal. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, I saw exhaustion carved into every line of his face. I'm not pretending anything. Then answer the question. My hands twisted in the blanket. What Serrano said about my father, about making him beg. Was it true? The silence stretched so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, yes. The single word detonated like a grenade. I sank onto the edge of the bed, legs suddenly unable to hold me. I was 23, he continued, voice flat. Clinical, like he was reading from a report. Hungry, ambitious. Vega's operation was the biggest thing on the East Coast, and I wanted it, needed it. He moved to the window, staring out at the city he'd built on corpses. Your father was Vega's accountant. He knew where every body was buried, every dollar hidden. He was a liability. So, you killed him. My voice sounded distant, disconnected. I killed everyone in that room. He turned to face me. Vega, his lieutenants, the lawyers, the accountants, anyone who could testify or retaliate. It was brutal, efficient, the kind of message that makes other men think twice about coming after you. He had a family. The words scraped out of me. A wife, 2 daughters. I know. His hands clenched into fists. I didn't know then. Didn't care to know. I was building an empire, and empires require sacrifice. Other people's sacrifice. He laughed bitterly. That's what I told myself. That's how I slept at night. And now? Now I know those daughters' names. He moved closer, and I saw the rawness in his expression. Emma and Brittany Stone. One became a paramedic, saved lives until a lawsuit destroyed her. The other, he stopped. I know your mother died 2 years ago. Cancer. That you're drowning in debt, paying for treatment that didn't work. I know you sing because you have to, not because you want to. I know everything, Emma, because I've spent 6 months trying to undo 15 years of damage. You can't undo murder. I know. He knelt in front of me, close enough that I could see the shadows under his eyes. But I tried. The medical debt? I paid it off. All of it. 3 months ago. My breath caught. What? The collection agency that kept calling you? They were paid in full. I made sure they'd never contact you again. His voice softened. I couldn't give you back your father. But I could give you that. Anger flared hot in my chest. You had no right. I had every right. His hand hovered near my face, but didn't touch. I took everything from you. The least I could do was give something back. That's not how this works. Tears burned my eyes. You don't get to play God with my life. You don't get to kill my father and then pay off my debts like it balances some cosmic scale. I know. Stop saying that. I stood, forcing him back. Stop acting like you understand. You don't. You can't. Because you're not the one who had to watch your mother die knowing you couldn't afford better treatment. You're not the one who had to choose between rent and chemotherapy. You're not. My voice broke. You're not the one who saved the life of her father's killer. The words hung between us, sharp and final. Donald stood slowly, and I saw something in him fracture. Not break men like him didn't break, but crack. A fault line spreading through granite. I would take it back if I could, he whispered. Every bullet, every order, every man I've killed. If it meant you could look at me without seeing a monster, I'd burn my empire to ash. But you can't. I moved toward him, drawn by something I didn't want to name. And even if you could, it wouldn't change what you are, what you'll always be. I reached up, cupping his face the way he'd done to me in the rain. His skin was warm beneath my palm. Human. Real. The man who'd held me while I bled. Who'd burned the city for me. Who'd killed my father. "I forgive you," I whispered. Hope flared in his eyes, desperate, painful. "But I can't unsee you." The hope died. He understood. I saw it in the way his shoulders dropped, the way his hand covered mine, one last time before letting go. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm going to leave." The words tasted like goodbye. I'm going to pack my things, walk out that door, and never come back. "And if I asked you to stay?" "You won't." I stepped back, putting distance between us. "Because deep down, you know I'm right. We're poisoned together. Beautiful, terrible poison." He didn't argue, didn't fight, just watched as I gathered the few belongings I had, clothes someone had brought from my apartment, my purse, the tips I'd earned a lifetime ago at the Glass Rose. The rain started as I reached the door. I could hear it against the windows, steady and relentless. The same rain that had been falling the night he found me. The night everything changed. I looked back once. Donald stood by the window, silhouetted against the gray light. His hand was pressed against the glass, and even from across the room, I could see the blood still staining his knuckles. Some stains never wash out. Emma. My name was a prayer, a curse. "If you ever need anything, I know where to find you." I pulled open the door. "Goodbye, Donald." He didn't say it back. Couldn't, maybe. Or wouldn't. It didn't matter. I walked out into the rain, and for the first time in weeks, I was invisible again. Exactly where I'd started. Exactly where I needed to be. 6 weeks passed like a held breath, slowly released. The scar on my cheekbone healed into a thin, silver line, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. The bruises faded. The cracked ribs knitted back together. Dr. Reyes had been right. The body is remarkably efficient at repairing damage. It's the soul that takes longer. I found a new apartment in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, a studio with a window that overlooked a fire escape and a landlord who didn't ask questions. The rent was manageable. More than manageable, actually. Once I realized my debt collectors had truly stopped calling. Donald's final gift. His albatross around my neck. I didn't go back to the Glass Rose. Couldn't. Not at first. Instead, I sang at smaller venues, dive bars in the East Village, open mic nights in Williamsburg, anywhere that would have me. My voice had changed. Deeper. Rougher. Like I'd swallowed smoke, and it had permanently altered something fundamental. People noticed. "You sing like someone who's survived something," a booking agent told me after a set at a bar in Red Hook. "That's rare. That's valuable." I didn't tell her what I'd survived. Didn't mention the man who'd torn the city apart from me, or the father I'd lost before I even knew I'd lost him. Some stories aren't meant for strangers. Brittany called every day for the first 2 weeks. Frantic. Terrified. The news had covered the warehouse fires, the bodies found in the East River, the sudden quiet that had settled over the city's underworld like snow. She'd heard rumors, wild, impossible rumors, about her sister and Donald Escobar. "Tell me it's not true," she'd begged, over a dinner I couldn't eat. "Tell me you weren't involved in all that." I'd looked at her, my baby sister, with Mom's laugh and Dad's eyes, and lied. I wasn't involved. I'm fine. Everything's fine. She'd wanted to believe me. So she did. The nightmares came in waves. Some nights I'd wake up gasping, feeling phantom hands around my throat. Other nights I'd dream of my father, a man I barely remembered, and wake up with tears on my face. And sometimes the dreams were of Donald. His hands gentle on my face. His voice in the darkness. His blood on my hands. Those were the worst, because I'd wake up missing him. Marco found me on a Thursday evening. I was leaving a rehearsal space in Greenwich Village when he appeared from the crowd, still smelling like cologne and cigarettes. "Emma." He looked older than I remembered. "Tired. Can we talk?" We found a coffee shop. He bought me tea I didn't drink and sat across from me, hands wrapped around his own cup like it could warm something cold inside him. "The Glass Rose isn't the same without you," he said finally. "The new girl, she's technically better. trained at Juilliard, but she doesn't have what you have. And what's that? Truth. He met my eyes. When you sang, people believed you. Even the hardest men in that room felt something. I stared at my untouched tea. I can't come back, Marco. I know. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. But he asked me to give you this. If I ever saw you. My hands trembled as I took it. Plain white envelope. No name. I knew Donald's handwriting from the notes he'd left on prescription bottles, on instructions for my care. This was the same hand, controlled, precise. I haven't seen him in weeks, Marco continued quietly. He comes to the club, but he sits in the back now, doesn't conduct business, doesn't take meetings, just listens to the new girl sing and drinks whiskey until closing. Marco, I'm not asking you to come back for him. He stood, leaving money on the table. I'm asking you to come back for yourself, because that stage was yours before it was ever his, and you deserve to take up space in your own life. He left me sitting there, with the envelope burning a hole in my palm. I didn't open it for 3 days. When I finally did, standing in my apartment at 2 a.m. with rain streaking the windows, there was no letter, no explanation, just a key brass, old-fashioned, attached to a small card with an address. The glass rose, and beneath it, in Donald's precise handwriting, it was always yours. The club looked the same when I walked in the following Thursday. Same velvet booths, same Art Deco chandeliers, same stage that had been my sanctuary and my prison. But everything felt different. The manager, a new face I didn't recognize, didn't question my arrival, just handed me the set list and told me I was on at 10, like I'd never left, like the past 6 weeks had been a dream. I stood backstage, listening to the murmur of voices beyond the curtain, feeling the familiar weight of sequins and silk, the smell of smoke and expensive perfume. Then Marco struck the opening chords, and I stepped into the light. The audience quieted. I saw familiar faces scattered throughout, men who'd watched me sing for 6 months without really seeing me. Now they stared like I was something new, something forged in fire. I opened my mouth and sang. Not the songs they expected, not the safe ballads about love and loss. I sang something raw, something true, a song about survival and scars and the terrible price of being seen. My voice filled the space differently now, stronger, certain, the voice of someone who died and come back different. Halfway through the second song, I saw him. Donald sat in the back booth where he'd always conducted his business. But there were no men in expensive suits tonight, no envelopes exchanged, no hushed conversations, just him, alone, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table. Our eyes met across the smoke and the distance. He didn't smile, didn't move, just watched me sing with an expression I couldn't read. Grief, maybe, or resignation, or something more complex than words could hold. I finished the set. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I stepped off stage, declined the offered drink, and made my way through the crowd. He was still there when I reached his booth, still watching, still silent. "The key," I said, holding it up. "It opens what?" "The club." His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in days. "I signed it over, put it in your name. The deed, the liquor license, all of it." I sank into the booth across from him. "Why?" "Because Marco was right. It was always yours." He finally picked up his whiskey, but didn't drink. "I've spent my life taking things. From you, from others, building an empire on what I could steal and hold." He set the glass down. "But you taught me something. Some things can't be taken. They have to be given freely, or not at all. Donald, I'm not asking you to forgive me again." He leaned back, and I saw how much these weeks had cost him, the weight he carried, the ghosts that haunted him. "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to have something that was yours, untainted by me, a place where you can sing without being invisible." The rain had started outside. I could hear it against the windows. The same rain that seemed to fall every time our worlds collided. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now?" He almost smiled. "Now you live. You sing. You take up space. He stood, pulling on his coat. And I learned to live with the fact that the best thing I ever did was let you go. He walked toward the exit, and I let him. Because he was right. Some love is meant to burn bright and brief. Some people change you, not by staying, but by leaving. But at the door, he paused, looked back. For what it's worth, he said, voice barely audible over the music. You were never my weakness, Emma. Our eyes held across the room. Two people forever altered by violence and choice. By the night it rained blood, and the morning we chose survival over surrender. You were my reason. Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain and the darkness and the city that would always belong to him in ways I never could. I stood there for a long time, holding the key to my future in my palm. The stage waited. The music called. And for the first time since that night in the alley 3 years ago, I knew exactly who I was. Not a victim, not a savior, not invisible. Just Emma Stone. Survivor, singer, owner of her own destiny. I walked back to the stage as Marco struck up a new song. The audience turned, expectant, and I sang. Not for Donald, not for the past, not for the ghosts that haunted us both. I sang for myself, and it was enough.